Imagine you're a teenager out in the middle of nowhere, and you find that you have an itch on your face that you just can't scratch. The more you scratch, the more it itches. And when you look down at the hand that had done the itching, there are chunks of flesh on it. What do you do next? Well, obviously you try shaving. And then you find yourself shaving the flesh right off your face. Go to a dermatologist and they're horrified by what they see. They've never seen anything like it before. Sounds like a scene from a horror movie, right? Well, it really happened to a young Eli Roth when he worked on a horse farm in Iceland when he was just 19 years old. Thankfully, the skin infection went away, but the trauma of the incident obviously stayed with him. That section of his life helped inspire one of the grossest horror flicks of the past 25 years. And while we're thrilled Eli survived the ordeal, we also can't help but be kind of glad that it happened to him. After all, we wouldn't have cabin fever otherwise. Is that messed up of us? If so, that's fitting, because this is one messed up movie, and so stay away from the shaving kit for just a little while, and let's find out what the happened to cabin fever.
Bert, you don't look so hot.
I don't feel so hot either, but the longer we sit here and argue, the more she lies there and rots.
Eli Roth grew up a horror fanatic, in part thanks to parents who didn't mind taking him to all sorts of scary movies when he was a kid. Obviously, a love affair with the genre was quickly born. Eli started making his own horror movies with friends when he was as young as 8 years old. After years of making gory short films, Eli was accepted into NYU and eventually won a Student Academy Award for his short Restaurant Dogs. A spoof, obviously, of Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. That Student Academy Award gave Roth some clout, and while he worked as a production assistant, and in several other departments on feature films, Roth worked on the screenplay for Cabin Fever, a horror movie that he modeled after Evil Dead, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and even John Carpenter's The Thing. It was Roth's intention to make something that was a throwback to the gnarly horror movies of the 70s and early 80s, before the slasher subgenre made its indelible impression on the genre overall, and effectively killed the public's interest in scary movies for a handful of years. He wanted to make a legit horror movie that had a few laughs in it, but when he showed his first draft to roommate Randy Perlstein, his friend told him that it was the funniest script he'd ever read. Confused by the reaction, Roth asked Perlstein for some notes, and that eventually turned into a collaboration that lasted a month and changed the structure and tone of the script. Roth then started sending the screenplay to all the studios in Hollywood, big and small, and was rejected every single time. He even started changing the title of the screenplay so that he could get readers to give it another chance, but that didn't help. He was told that horror was dead, and it looked as if Cabin Fever was too. Even the success of Scream did him no favors, because naturally, the studios now wanted Cabin Fever to be more like Scream. It was only until the breakout successes of The Sixth Sense and The Blair Witch Project that Hollywood realized that horror was back in vogue. That said, there was still no money for Roth's skin-crawling horror show, which wasn't going to be a fun PG-13 romp, but a grueling gross-out meant for the strong-stomached. Eventually, he plugged away enough to get some seed money to start pre-production. Not a ton of dough, but enough to get the ball rolling. Roth started the casting process almost immediately, thinking that if he could get some actors on board, that would encourage other producers to pitch into the budget.
Action!
Cabin Fever started shooting footage when the production only had $50,000, with Roth praying that the rest of the necessary money would come in. Eli did have one other card to play that undoubtedly helped. He was once an assistant for none other than David Lynch, and even helped the legendary director with content for his infamous website, davidlynch.com. Lynch was something of a mentor for Roth, and that relationship led to Lynch lending his name to Cabin Fever as an executive producer. Now, if that's shocking news to you, don't feel ashamed. Ultimately, Lynch's name did not appear in Cabin Fever's credits. The main reason was that Lynch's involvement led the unions to shut down production at one point because they thought the film was a higher budgeted affair than it was. As a result, Lynch eventually took his name off of the $1.5 million film. That wasn't the only shutdown that the film encountered. Evidently, on the first day of shooting, investors became panicked when the anthrax scare of September 2001 was shaking up the US and pulled their money from production. The film was shooting literally 1 month after 9/11, and tensions were still high everywhere in the country. Obviously, things eventually got back on track, with shooting taking place in North Carolina. For his cast, Roth assembled an ensemble of familiar faces, familiar depending on what you watched. Originally, Smallville's Lex Luthor, Michael Rosenbaum, was actually cast in the film, but obviously didn't end up being in the final product. Ryder Strong, at the time best known for the ABC show Boy Meets World, got the lead role of Paul, even though Roth had no idea he was something of a teen idol at the time. Strong admitted that he was eager to shed that image and couldn't wait for fans of Boy Meets World to go see the film and be traumatized by what they saw. Roth had learned from David Lynch that a part of the audition process that's very helpful is simply talking to the actors, as opposed to just watching them audition. He thought you'd get a better feel for the actor that way. This helped Roth with the rest of casting, but sometimes he just got a bit of a feel for the actor by the way they behaved. It was one such conversation with Jordan Ladd that made him certain she was the woman to play the doomed girl next door, Karen. Ladd was not a fan of horror films at the time, so Roth put her through a boot camp of sorts of some of his horror favorites. James DeBello, who plays the beer-guzzling Bert, would not follow Roth's directions during his audition and would roll his eyes at the director. Usually not ideal qualities, except such behavior made Eli think DeBello was perfect for the part of the brash hothead. Giuseppe Andrews, who plays the infamous Deputy Winston, originally auditioned to play the lead character Paul, but because of his demeanor and the fact that he said "man" over and over again during their meeting, Roth rightly assumed that Andrews would be a perfect party-obsessed small-town cop. Roth even put himself in the film as a pot-smoking camper named Justin. But that was more thanks to convenience, as the original actor he hired for the part had to be replaced. Roth went under the pseudonym David Kaufbird in the credits. The film shot for 24 days, many of these days quite long, with some major bumps along the way. Actor Joey Kern evidently kept experiencing eye infections, which took him out of commission frequently and caused the schedule to change drastically. Some scenes that were meant to take place during the day were shot at night, creating headaches for the cast and crew. Actress Serena Vincent, who plays Sex Pot Marcy, was apparently one of the unhappier campers, not enjoying the sex scene that she and Strong have because she did not want to be fully nude for it, creating some conflict between her and Roth. She also didn't have a great time during the grotesque leg shaving scene that sees her peel the flesh from her skin. That scene was shot in a frigid soundstage at 4 in the morning in a fake tub. Not ideal circumstances. Strong would also express how uncomfortable he was during the night shoots, especially when he was covered in corn syrup for several nights in a row when it was freezing outside. It would take several days to fully get all of the fake blood off of his body. After the incident where the union shut the film down, the production moved to Los Angeles and resumed filming a handful of extra scenes, while also hoping to continue raising money for the post-production. At one point, a group of investors were holding off sending the production something in the neighborhood of $300,000 because they simply weren't sure if they wanted to be part of the picture. One of the investors apparently showed his 12-year-old son a very rough cut of the film on VHS, and the kid went nuts for it, prompting the rest of the money to be sent to Roth and his editors. Roth thanks that anonymous kid to this day for convincing his parent to kick in the rest of the money. They finished the film literally 1 day before they had to show it at its first festival. Thanks to his relationship with David Lynch, Roth was able to get Lynch's composer, Angelo Badalamenti, who scored Twin Peaks and Mulholland Drive, amongst others, to lend some music to the film, resulting in 3 different themes. The rest of the film's score was composed by Nathan Barr, who would go on to compose Roth's Hostel movies. When the film was complete, Roth had the clever notion of leaking some on-set photos to IMDb, specifically gory shots that would pique the interests of horror fiends. Then, going one better, he sent images to Ain't It Cool News founder Harry Knowles, who wrote glowingly about the upcoming horror flick, which was set to debut at the Toronto Film Festival's Midnight Madness section. Cabin Fever was the very last movie shown at TIFF that year, so late that the closing night party was already commencing before the film was finished. But the real party was happening inside the screening room, where prospective buyers were watching Cabin Fever with bated breath. According to Roth, it was only 15 minutes into the film that people started rushing out and negotiating for the film's rights. Eventually, studios from all over Hollywood, even the ones who turned down the Cabin Fever script, were now trying to buy it. By the time that it was over, Roth was the toast of Toronto, and Lionsgate eventually walked away with the distribution rights for $3.5 million. Wise choice, because it eventually turned out to be the studio's highest grossing movie that year. Cabin Fever made an impressive $8 million on its opening weekend in September of 2003, on its way to making $30 million worldwide. Not bad for a movie that started shooting with just 50 grand, and just a fleeting hope that more money would come in. The film itself has some famous fans as well, including, naturally, Quentin Tarantino, who would eventually decide to produce Roth's next film. Peter Jackson, who was in production on Return of the King in New Zealand, requested a print of the movie because he kept hearing how special it was. Jackson screened the film for cast and crew 2 times and even invited Roth to the set. Ultimately, Jackson's enthusiasm for the picture extended to the marketing campaign, where he gave the film a quote stating that it was a movie horror fans had been waiting years for. As Jackson apparently never gave out quotes, this was high praise indeed. Lionsgate ended up trimming the film by a few minutes before releasing it, much to Roth's chagrin, but Eli ultimately got to show the cut that played on the festival circuit on Blu-ray several years later. Cabin Fever spawned 2 direct-to-video sequels, and even a remake, which used Roth's original screenplay, written when he was in his early 20s. While those movies have mostly been left in the dustbin of movie history, the original Cabin Fever is a film that no one can forget. Love it or hate it, it helped revive a dormant subgenre, the R-rated splatter picture, and the horror world has always been better off for it. Now, who's in the mood for pancakes?
Pancakes! No pancakes!
Thanks for watching our documentary. Hope you've learned a little something and had fun in the process.